There's a certain kind of power that comes not from what we share, but from what we choose to hold back. In a world that celebrates exposure, vulnerability, and openness, we've glorified the act of sharing everything. But just because we can expose something doesn't mean we should. Strength isn't always loud. Confidence doesn't always require proof. And the wisest people often speak the least about what matters most. So today, I want to take you through 12 things, 12 powerful parts of your life you should never expose carelessly. Not because hiding is better, but because protecting your peace, your progress, and your purpose demands a different kind of discipline. Your long-term plans, sharing your goals too early invites judgment, competition, and energy that may not align with your mission. When you talk too soon, you open the door to doubt. Let your actions speak before your words do. Your income money has a way of distorting relationships. Whether it's more or less than others expect, it invites envy or judgment. Let your character define your worth, not your salary. Your good deeds, true kindness doesn't crave applause. When you broadcast your generosity, it becomes less about the act and more about the credit. Help in silence, and you'll feel the reward in your soul, not in someone else's recognition. Your family conflicts venting might feel good, but airing personal disputes invites outsiders into private rooms. Resolve inside, grow together, and understand that loyalty sometimes looks like silence. Your relationship problems, no couple is perfect. But exposing your partner's flaws or your struggles to outsiders creates cracks that are hard to seal again. Build a foundation through communication, not exposure. Your spiritual journey, this path is personal, sacred. Not everyone will understand your beliefs or how you connect with something bigger. When you share too much, you risk turning your spiritual evolution into performance instead of transformation. Your acts of discipline, waking up early, fasting, journaling, sacrificing, these things are sacred commitments between you and your higher self. If you share every disciplined act, it starts to become a performance, not a practice. Your good ideas too soon, not everyone can see the vision you hold. Exposing a brilliant idea before it matures leaves it vulnerable to criticism, theft, or discouragement. Protect it like a seed. Let it root before you show the tree. Your past mistakes, set without purpose, yes, being honest about where you've been can be powerful, but only when it's framed with wisdom. Don't reveal your past to seek validation or pity. Share it when it serves as a lesson for others, not just as a confession. Your next move in life surprise has strength. Strategy works best in silence. When everyone knows your next step, it's easier for them to prepare a response. Protect the momentum, move quietly, then let the impact make the noise. Your private pain, there are wounds meant to be healed in silence. Not everyone has the compassion or wisdom to hold your story gently. Speak to those who have earned the right to hear your pain. Your level of awareness, when you see through people, situations, or manipulation, don't always expose that awareness. Knowing is power. Exposing it might only make people more cautious around you. Let your wisdom guide your choices, not your ego. Keynotes from the speech, just because you can share something doesn't mean you should. Discernment is a form of wisdom. Your peace is often protected not by what you say, but by what you choose to withhold. Silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. It's what protects your goals from noise and your soul from pollution. Privacy creates power. When you guard sacred aspects of your life, you give them the space to evolve freely. Maturity is knowing when to speak for impact, not for attention. Just because you can share something doesn't mean you should. Discernment is a form of wisdom. We live in a time where sharing is not just encouraged, it's often expected. The world rewards openness, applauds vulnerability, and celebrates those who pour their hearts out for public consumption. But what we've lost in this flood of exposure is the art of discretion, the power of knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. And that's not just a social skill, it's a deep form of emotional and intellectual intelligence. Every time we speak, we make a trade. We exchange our internal clarity for external reaction. And if we're not careful, we might trade something precious for something fleeting. There's a dangerous assumption that being open about everything makes us more real, more relatable, and more respected. But that's not always the case. Oversharing doesn't always build trust. It can erode it. When we talk too much, too soon, or to the wrong people, we invite judgment, interference, and sometimes even sabotage. Wisdom lies in knowing the difference between transparency and vulnerability without direction. Discernment asks a different question than most people are used to. It doesn't ask, what can I say? It asks what needs to be said and to whom and why. That level of inner filtering requires maturity. It requires a sense of alignment with your values and a deep awareness of your audience. Not everyone has earned the right to hear your story. Not every listener has your best interest at heart. And not every space is sacred enough to hold your truth safely. When you learn to honor that, you begin to move through life more intentionally with less regret and more peace. There's also a cost to revealing something prematurely. Think about goals, dreams, or personal growth. When you speak about something too soon, you shift your energy from building to defending. The minute you expose a personal aspiration, it's no longer just yours. It becomes subject to opinions, criticism, projections, and comparisons. Now, instead of nurturing that dream, you're managing how people react to it. That's exhausting, that's distracting, and often that's discouraging. Some of the strongest momentum dies not because the dream was weak, but because it was exposed too early to an audience that couldn't see the vision. Discernment teaches us that privacy is not secrecy. Keeping something to yourself doesn't mean you're hiding. It means you're protecting. It means you value the sacred nature of that thing too much to place it under careless eyes or unkind voices. And it also means you trust yourself enough to handle certain things without needing constant validation from others. That's strength. That's self-leadership. When you choose not to share something, it also doesn't mean you lack courage. In fact, it often takes more courage to remain silent in a world that demands your voice. Everyone wants a piece of your truth, but real power lies in knowing which parts of your truth are yours to hold. When you own that boundary, you're not being cold, you're being wise. You're creating a space where things can grow without interruption, evolve without distortion, and succeed without the pressure of an audience. Discernment is also deeply tied to emotional discipline. It's easy to share everything when emotions are high, whether it's excitement, anger, fear, or joy. But the most grounded people know how to pause. They understand that not every emotional impulse deserves an audience. They've learned that silence is often the most powerful response, especially when emotions haven't yet settled into clarity. Speaking out of impulse might feel good in the moment, but it often leads to consequences we didn't anticipate. And once something is said, it can't be unsaid. Once something is exposed, it can't be unexposed. That's why discernment matters so much. In the end, every word you say is a reflection of your judgment. Every decision to speak or not to communicates how well you understand yourself and the world around you. The people who master the art of restraint are often the ones who earn the deepest respect, not because they're quiet, but because they're intentional. They don't throw their thoughts around for attention. They hold them like currency, spending them only where there's value. And in doing so, they protect their peace, preserve their power, and walk through life with a calm confidence that doesn't need an audience to validate it. That's the wisdom of discernment. It's not just about knowing what to say. It's about knowing when your silence says more. Your peace is often protected not by what you say, but by what you choose to withhold. We've been conditioned to believe that speaking up is always the right move, that clarity, strength, and progress come from expression. But there is a quieter form of strength, one that's found in restraint. There's a form of protection not in exposure, but in the silence you keep when you know not everything is meant to be voiced. Peace isn't always something you find sometimes. It's something you protect, and that protection begins with what you allow the world to see or hear about your inner world. In moments of tension or conflict, the natural human reaction is to speak, to defend, to explain. We often believe that saying more will resolve more. But the truth is, peace doesn't grow in noise. It doesn't thrive in environments where every thought is vocalized, every emotion spilled, every reaction shared. Peace grows in space, in boundaries, in the decision to pause and not let everything that touches your mind flow out through your mouth. When we withhold certain thoughts or emotions, not out of fear but out of wisdom, we allow peace to remain intact. There's an invisible weight that comes with overexposure. The more we share, especially with the wrong people or at the wrong time, the more we open ourselves to energy that doesn't serve us, opinions that aren't helpful, advice that isn't aligned, criticism that isn't rooted in care. And once you absorb all that noise, your mind starts to spiral. You begin to question your instincts, you dilute your clarity. And in trying to be open, you trade your peace for confusion. That's why withholding isn't weakness, it's a shield. It's the barrier between your inner calm and the outer chaos. People often confuse silence with suppression. But there's a vast difference. Suppression is fear-driven. It's when we silence ourselves because we're scared of being judged. But wise withholding is clarity-driven. It's when we choose not to speak because we understand that some conversations are not worth our energy. Some truths are not ready to be received. Some emotions are still being processed and don't need to be exposed before they're understood. There is an emotional maturity in saying, this doesn't need to be shared right now, not because it isn't valid, but because peace is more valuable than expression in this moment. Even in relationships, the habit of withholding is often misunderstood. We believe we owe our partner, our friends, or our family every corner of our emotional landscape. But sometimes sharing too much, especially when emotions are raw, leads to unnecessary harm. A temporary feeling, if vocalized without filter, can do permanent damage. Words once spoken create ripples. And when we don't take time to reflect before we speak, we risk disturbing the very relationships we're trying to nurture. Choosing to hold back in those moments isn't about being dishonest. It's about being responsible. The same applies to our ambitions and dreams. When we expose every hope, every idea, every next move, we often open ourselves to interference. People might not mean harm, but their doubts, fears, or projections can subtly infect our confidence. And once self-doubt enters, peace begins to erode. That's why protecting your peace means keeping your next step close to your chest until it's strong enough to walk on its own. When we shield our progress from premature exposure, we preserve the clarity and stillness that got us moving in the first place. In the digital age, the pressure to share is constant. We're told to document everything, to post every win, to confess every struggle. But not everything that happens within you is meant for public view. Some breakthroughs are sacred. Some lessons are still unfolding. Some pains are still tender. Exposing them too early not only compromises your peace, it turns your life into a spectacle rather than a journey. By learning to withhold with intention, you begin to live more inwardly, more mindfully, and more in control. There's also peace in knowing that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Just because someone asks doesn't mean you owe them an answer. Just because someone listens doesn't mean they understand. Protecting your peace sometimes means creating silence even when others are seeking sound. It's in these boundaries that you reclaim power over your mind, your emotions, and the direction of your life. It's a form of self-respect to know that you don't have to explain everything, to know that your thoughts are yours to keep until you are ready, or not at all. So when you feel the urge to explain yourself, to share too soon, to release emotion before it's settled, pause. Ask yourself, will this contribute to my peace or take from it? Will speaking now add value or noise? That tiny moment of self-inquiry can save you hours, days, even years of regret. Because peace is not always found in a calm environment, it's found in calm decisions. And one of the most powerful decisions you can make is to withhold what the world doesn't need to know until you are sure you are ready and they are worthy of hearing it. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. It's what protects your goals from noise and your soul from pollution. We often mistake the quiet ones for those who lack ambition, power, or vision. But in truth, the ones who move in silence often go the farthest, not because they're hiding, but because they're focused. The loudest voices in the room are not always the wisest. And in a world that rewards constant updates, rapid reactions, and instant sharing, there is a rare power in choosing not to broadcast your every move. We live in a culture that measures progress by visibility. If you're not showing it, they assume it's not happening, but true success doesn't require an audience. Some of the most meaningful breakthroughs, the most transformative growth, and the most solid achievements happen away from the spotlight. Silence gives you room to think without pressure, to fail without judgment, and to rise without resistance. It creates a sacred space where you can build freely without external voices diluting your purpose or redirecting your path. Strategy is about movement with intention, and intention cannot thrive in chaos. When everyone knows what you're doing, when they have access to your dreams, your decisions, your difficulties, they start influencing your process, intentionally or not. Their doubts become yours. Their fears echo in your mind. Their timelines distort your own. But when you choose silence, you reclaim control. You build from within, not from the outside in. You don't let the noise shape the direction. You let your values, your intuition, and your discipline guide you. Silence is also protection. Not everyone around you wants to see you win. Some people mask their envy with fake encouragement. Some project their limitations onto your potential. Others simply don't understand the path you've chosen. When you move in silence, you avoid unnecessary explanations, avoid useless debates, and avoid carrying the emotional weight of convincing people of a future they cannot see. You don't need their validation to keep going, you need focus. And silence is the container that preserves that focus. There's a strategic advantage in being underestimated. When you keep your progress private, you remove the pressure to perform. You're not working for applause, you're working for alignment. You're not chasing recognition, you're chasing results. And because no one sees it coming, your success speaks louder when it finally arrives. It's not about being sneaky or secretive. It's about being smart. You've recognized that not every seed needs to be shown while it's still under the soil. Let it grow. Let it take root. Then, when it's ready, it will rise, and people will see the results without you ever having to explain the process. Silence also helps maintain your emotional clarity. The more you talk about your plans, your pain, or your progress, the more you risk turning your journey into a performance. You start seeking reactions instead of results. You start adjusting your pace to fit someone else's comfort. But when you remain quiet, you move with self-trust. You check in with your own compass, not the crowd's applause, and that inner connection becomes your most powerful asset. It allows you to stay calm in the chaos, steady in uncertainty, and sharpen environments that blur the vision of most. People often speak just to feel seen. But feeling seen and being understood are not the same. The ones who speak with depth are the ones who've spent time in silence, refining their thoughts, processing their emotions, and observing the world without needing to insert their voice into every conversation. Their words carry weight because they don't waste them. Their actions speak because they've built in silence. And their presence feels strong even when they say nothing at all. Strategy requires discipline, and silence demands discipline. Not because it's easy, but because it's effective. You will feel the urge to prove, to show, to explain. But the deeper your self-awareness becomes, the less you feel the need to convince others. The more committed you are to the process, the less you'll need people to understand it. You'll know that clarity isn't given by others, it's built by you. In silence, through repetition, through effort, and through a trust that doesn't need to shout to know it's on the right path. In a noisy world, silence is a statement. It tells people that you are not moved by distractions. It tells them you are not building for applause. It tells them you are moving with purpose and that the outcome will speak for itself. So when in doubt, don't speak louder, move smarter. Let your silence do the work. Let it protect your process, preserve your peace, and position you exactly where you need to be. Privacy creates power. When you guard sacred aspects of your life, you give them the space to evolve freely. In a world obsessed with transparency, where every detail is shared, posted, and broadcasted for public consumption, there is a quiet revolution happening in those who choose privacy over performance. The people who understand the power of privacy aren't hiding, they're cultivating. They've realized that certain parts of life, especially the most meaningful ones, grow stronger in silence, away from external expectations, judgment, and interference. When something is new, fragile, or just beginning, it's vulnerable. Whether it's a dream, a relationship, a healing process, or a personal transformation, these things need protection, not publicity. When you make something private, you give it space to develop its roots. You're not rushing to show it to the world before it's stable. You're not looking for approval or applause. You're allowing it to take shape in its own time, free from pressure. That's where the real power begins. When something grows not for others to see, but because it's aligned with who you are becoming, we often mistake visibility for strength. We think that if we share our goals, if we reveal our plans, or if we show our progress, it somehow validates our growth. But that's not always true. Sometimes exposing the process too soon weakens it. It invites opinions that aren't helpful, criticism that's not constructive, and noise that clouds our clarity. The more voices in your head, the harder it is to hear your own. Privacy clears the space so your intuition can breathe. It gives your vision room to unfold without the weight of someone else's doubts. Privacy also preserves energy. Every time you share something, you invite a response. That response might be support, but it might also be resistance, confusion, envy, or comparison. And all of those responses require emotional management. Suddenly, you're spending more energy explaining your choices, defending your path, or dealing with reactions you never asked for. But when you keep things private, you conserve that energy, you use it to build, to refine, to align, not to react. That conservation of energy is what turns ideas into execution, healing into wholeness, and quiet intention into powerful outcomes. There's something sacred about privacy. When you don't constantly share your life, your relationships, your struggles, or your dreams, you begin to appreciate them more deeply. You live in the moment instead of documenting it. You process emotions instead of performing them. You celebrate milestones in a way that's personal, meaningful, and deeply fulfilling. And when setbacks come, you handle them with grace instead of shame, because you're not worried about how it looks. You're focused on how it feels. That kind of inner strength is born from privacy. It comes from building a life that doesn't need to be seen to be real. Privacy also allows you to connect more authentically with yourself and with others. When everything is public, there's pressure to maintain a certain image. You start curating your life for an audience instead of living it for your soul. But when your life is private, your choices become more honest. You say what you mean. You do what matters. You surround yourself with people who see the real you, not the version you've projected. Relationships become deeper. Conversations become richer. And your connection to your purpose becomes clearer because it's not being filtered through the lens of public opinion. Choosing privacy is not about isolation. It's about intentional access. It means not everyone gets to see every chapter of your story. It means being selective about who you invite into your sacred spaces, whether that's your home, your heart, or your mind. It's an act of self-respect to say, this part of my life is for me. It doesn't mean you're selfish or secretive. It means you're wise enough to know that not everything valuable should be visible. Some things are more powerful when protected. People often think that keeping things private means you're not proud of them. But the opposite is true. You're proud enough to protect them. You value them enough to not expose them to opinions that might shrink them. You trust that the right people will understand without needing proof and that the wrong people don't need access anyway. That kind of confidence is rare. It comes from within. And once you learn to live that way, to build in silence, to love in silence, to grow in silence, you begin to experience peace on a whole new level. A peace that doesn't rely on validation, noise, or performance. A peace that is rooted in the power of privacy. Maturity is knowing when to speak for impact, not for attention. There's a point in life where you stop talking just to be heard and start speaking only when your words serve a purpose. That shift marks the difference between seeking validation and seeking growth. It's the quiet evolution from needing to prove yourself to simply being yourself. And in that evolution, your voice changes, not in volume, but in intention. You begin to understand that every word carries weight, and maturity means carrying that weight responsibly. When we're younger or less grounded, we often speak out of impulse. We speak because we want to feel seen, acknowledged, and important. We want to show others how much we know, how strong we are, how far we've come. But that kind of speaking rarely creates real connection. It's loud but hollow. It's expressive but not effective. As you mature, you start realizing that your voice is a tool, and like any powerful tool, it must be used with care. You stop speaking out of insecurity and start speaking out of clarity. The most impactful words don't come from the desire to impress. They come from the desire to influence meaningfully. Mature communication is less about performance and more about presence. You listen before you speak. You think before you respond. You evaluate not just what you're saying, but why you're saying it. And if your words don't serve a deeper purpose, whether that's healing, understanding, clarity, or progress, you learn to withhold them. That isn't silence born from fear. It's silence born from strength. Maturity also teaches you that timing matters just as much as content. Saying the right thing at the wrong time can do more harm than good. Impactful speech requires patience. Sometimes it means waiting until the emotions settle. Sometimes it means recognizing that the other person isn't ready to receive what you're offering. Sometimes It means knowing that silence will say more than words ever could. When you understand that, you stop wasting your voice on conversations that lead nowhere. You conserve your energy for when it truly matters. There's also a deep wisdom in recognizing that not every thought needs to be shared. Just because something is true doesn't mean it needs to be said. Just because you have an opinion doesn't mean it needs to be voiced. Maturity is the filter that helps you separate what's useful from what's just noise. You begin to value peace over being right, connection over confrontation, and growth over ego. And that shift in priorities shapes the way you speak, the way you listen, and the way others experience your presence. People who speak for impact don't just think about their own expression. They think about how their words will land. They ask themselves, will this inspire? Will this educate? Will this create clarity or confusion? Will this build trust or break it? They speak with a sense of responsibility because they understand that words can heal, but they can also harm. They're careful not to use their voice as a weapon, even when they're angry or hurt. That's not suppression. It's discipline. It's the ability to lead with intention instead of reaction. As you grow, you also realize that attention is a fleeting currency. You might gain someone's attention by being loud, by making a statement, by forcing a point, but that doesn't mean you've earned their respect. Attention without substance fades quickly. It's addictive, but shallow. Impact, on the other hand, is lasting. When you speak from a place of grounded truth, when your words align with your values and your actions, people remember. They feel something. And that feeling sticks long after the conversation ends. The people who leave the deepest impact are often the ones who speak the least but say the most. They don't rush to fill silence. They don't speak to compete. They speak to contribute. And when they do, people listen, not because they're loud, but because they're intentional. That kind of presence is rare. It's magnetic. And it's built not through constant speaking, but through consistent growth. There's a calm power in knowing that you don't have to respond to everything, that not every challenge requires your rebuttal, that not every insult deserves your explanation. When you speak only for impact, you're not trying to control how people see you. You're focused on staying true to how you see yourself. That internal alignment becomes your guide. And from that place, every word you choose becomes a reflection of who you are, not just what you feel in the moment. That's what maturity sounds like: quiet, confident, and deeply impactful in a world that constantly encourages us to speak louder, share more, and expose everything. Real strength lies in choosing what to protect. The most powerful parts of your life, your dreams, your growth, your peace, your relationships, deserve more than public validation. They deserve your mindful protection. What you withhold doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. When you move with intention, speak with purpose, and guard your energy with discernment, you stop living for the noise and start living for alignment. Silence becomes your strategy. Privacy becomes your strength. And maturity becomes your compass. Because at the end of the day, it's not about being seen. It's about being centered. Not about proving anything to the world, but about preserving what truly matters within you.